Afzal Khan, the Labour MP for Manchester Gorton, and was one of those lawmakers who chose to defy his party. He's here live with us in the London studio. Thank you very much for your time, Afzal. Now, why is it that UK lawmakers are apparently so out of sync with the hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters that we've seen taking to our streets here in the UK?
Well, I find that also disappointing that we can see on the streets of Britain how the protesters of hundreds of thousands all over Britain are actually protesting. There's been polls we are also indicating the majority of the people in Britain wish there to be a ceasefire, and yet the political elite are not matching up to that. They seem to be in a different place. I'm disappointed with our current government, whose job it is really, but not only of maintaining peace because of permanent member in the UN, but also our historical connection. And yet we are not doing that. But we had the vote there, and as you rightly said, there was sizable people who actually thought, no, there has to be a ceasefire. I was one of those who resigned from the front bench.
And we've seen rifts in particular, deep divisions that have hit your opposition Labour Party. Tell us more about this stance that you have taken and calling for the ceasefire, and exactly why it is so important to you.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a deep rift in the party, but the way I would look at it is that actually all of us want peace. It's how we get that peace there is a difference. The leadership is of the opinion that at the moment a long pause is the way forward, whereas for people like myself, I think ceasefire is more appropriate at this stage. And the fundamental difference on this opinion, I think, is that is being a practical on the leadership's point of view that, look, there should be that pause, then probably leading to the ceasefire, and then the key point of being resolution to this whole dispute, which has a long history. But for me is a ceasefire, because I think there's been huge, huge loss of innocent life. And we've seen already about 5,000 innocent children have lost their life as well. No, what crime have they done? That, I think, is the fundamental difference. And the second point, I think, in my thinking is that this issue needs a resolution. It's no good dealing with the causes. We need to get to the root. And the root is having a two states, which we have failed to do. The international community has also failed with this. And if we don't get to that, every day we lose. Like I said in my speech in the parliament, 144 children would have been alive if there had been a ceasefire yesterday. That's a huge number. And why there should be urgency for the ceasefire.
And we've touched on the Labour Party. What's your opinion of Rishi Sunak's, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's stance on the war in Gaza?
Well, I think it's just not appropriate and not right. And I find it almost offensive seeing Rishi Sunak going to Israel with a military plane and then posing there for photographs. Now, Israel is one of the powerful armies we have in the world. They don't need army to be further strengthened so they can go and bomb the civilians. They have enough of that strength. There is no army on the other side as well, don't forget, yeah? So I just don't see that how they're playing their part. I think their part ultimately had to be, as a good friend of Israel, really tell them, stop this. We've been there many times. We've seen cycle after cycle of violence. It's not new. There's already been 5-6 wars in the last 15 years in Gaza. So going through the same cycle, how does that give you a different result? It doesn't. It hasn't provided security for the Israeli people. So why keep going on this? I think they need to move towards resolving it. So as a good friend of Israel, they should actually tell them that and say, stop this illegal settlements and get on with resolving this issue so that both people in Palestine and Israel can live in peace.
You say so that they can live in peace. If there is a ceasefire, what next? Do you truly believe that a two-state solution would work and that Israelis and Palestinians could live peacefully side by side? Do you truly believe that?
I personally do. The truth is, both these people have been living together in the past historically for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's the failure of the political leadership. And we also know when there's a failure in political policies that you end up in a war. But we've also seen the long 50, 60 years of so many different wars that hasn't resolved it. So get on with the political side of it and get it resolved. I have no reason why they couldn't live together. If they can be living before hundreds of years, why can't they live now? They can. Ultimately, I've been involved with this work in the Greater Manchester. About 80 years ago, I set up Greater Manchester Muslim Jewish Forum. And in the last Gaza war, we brought the people together. And the thing that struck me was that both sides wanted exactly the same thing, and that is peace and lived peacefully.
And what happens in Gaza when this war does finish? What happens then? Who's in control? How do they rebuild? What's next?
Well, look, number one has to be the ceasefire, isn't it? And then who is in control is a matter for the Palestinian people, and they should decide. So that's as far as I'm concerned. But the damage which has been done is tremendous. So I think international community also needs to help them to rebuild. And what we can't have is like some of these senior Israeli politicians behaving and saying, that the rest of the world is, their life in Gaza is terrible, therefore the world should share them out somehow. I just find that offensive. That's also similar to ethnic cleansing idea. What we need to do is let them live where they want and provide that help, whatever we can, so they can have a reasonable life. But the key point for me is resolving this dispute, not put it in a cold store again, but get it sorted.
You mentioned their ethnic cleansing. Now, Israel must act in accordance of international law. That means innocent civilians should and must be protected. What more should governments be doing to put pressure on Israel, to keep the pressure on Israel to comply with these laws?
As far as I'm concerned, again, I refer to my speech in which I said, as far as I'm concerned, all the red lines which govern this international law of war have been broken by Israel. So many other experts are saying the same thing. The UN Secretary General is saying the same thing. So there's ample evidence of that. But whatever our government is doing clearly is not enough. Standing next to Israel like this, not preventing this, is not being a good friend. They actually need to make sure they do that. I hope that they do that.
Afzal, as a Muslim, I've been deeply affected. I think we all have through these very moving, tragic scenes that we're seeing daily coming out of Gaza. But as a Muslim, how do they affect you?
Well, for me, it doesn't matter actually who you are, what faith you have. The key point is humanity. We are all humans. And when you see this suffering, when you see those innocent children being blown in pieces, when you see parents writing their names on their limbs, that's painful. Probably one of the most disturbing scene I had seen was a father carrying the child's pieces in a carrier bag. I have children, you will, I hope, have children, others have children. Can you imagine this? It's so painful.
And what have you thought of the global Muslim community and them coming together and their response to what's going on in Gaza?
For us, as Muslims, again, we know that killing of a single innocent person is as though killing humanity. Caring for others, wishing for others good things is also part of our faith. As the Prophet said, best among humanity are those who bring benefit to others. So seeing this tragedy, terrible loss of life, destruction, our hearts are bleeding. We want this to stop. And we, only 2-3 days ago, we had an event in Manchester where there was a fundraising to help them. And you could see how people were moved. And well over 100,000 was given by ordinary people to help them because they could see that need. They could see that suffering. And therefore, they want to do their bit. And the good people of Britain, you can see as well how they're coming out week after week all over the Britain, say, let's have peace. Let's have ceasefire.
Afzal, thank you very much for your time, for coming into the London studio tonight to talk to us.